a brief introduction to Professor Andre. To those of you that who don't know Professor Andre, he's an educator. He's a board member and a person who's been in real estate and financial investments to do with real estate over the past, say, quarter of a century. He's delved into learning ecosystems and life lessons over the past few years. And this connection to real estate is certainly something that needs to be looked into, because everything is networking these days. And the more you network, the more you learn, the more capable of decision-making you are through others' learning experiences. So yeah, we appreciate your involvement, Professor Andre. And just a little more, Professor Andre has been a lecturer at the Schulich Business School and Columbia University. He's been teaching real estate and financial investment over the last 19 years or more. He spent over 19 years with Prudential of America and managed their Canadian property portfolio, among other investment or board involvement for retirement residences along those lines. So we're gonna just have Professor Andre give us a talk and share his experiences through a PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll open the floor up for discussion. And again, thank you, Professor Andre, and we look forward to learning from your experiences.
Well, okay, thank you, Bashar, and thank you to you and to Issa for the invitation, and to David for the introduction and the connection. And you mentioned networking, and you mentioned that's everything. I mean, that's what people tell students. That's what we tell students at Schulich. But what's networking about? It's really about relationships more than just meeting people. And so that's sort of what I want to talk to you a little bit about. I've been you've made me a lot younger than I am. I've actually been in real estate since I graduated in '76, and I've been involved in real estate as an institutional investor, and then as a teacher and as a director of on several company boards for 45 years. So I guess that's a long period of time. And what I do see, the industry is evolving quite a bit. But what I want to talk to you about is not just how the industry is evolving, but also about the program at Schulich and the Masters in Real Estate and Infrastructure that was my sort of opportunity to design a few years ago, and we launched it about 4 years ago. And what I try to do, and incorporate into that program is a lot of, basically what I had learned over those 45 years, both as a participant in the industry and as a teacher. And so I think you've allowed me to screen share, and I'm going to do that now. And what I wanted to start with here, let me just change the view, is really two sort of foundational ideas that were really in my mind, in designing the program. And the first is, the world does not need more real estate analysts. And, business schools, that's what we do, is we produce analysts for the most part. But what we really need is more and better leaders. And so in designing this program, that's sort of the theme of the whole program. And we actually have 3 leadership courses that we sequence through the 11 months of the program. So the students are always sort of dealing with issues related to leadership as part of their education at Schulich in the MREI. And the second thing that I try to incorporate is sort of the knowledge that we don't learn everything we need to know from books and from lectures. And some people will tell you that's about 10% of learning. And the rest is what we learn from experience and from our relationships, our engagement with other people. So when I talk about a learning ecosystem, that's really referring to the combination of actual formal curriculum and formal learning, but also everything we do outside the classroom and all the people we try to connect our students with and the learning that takes place as a function of all of that. And one more thing I'll mention about that program before I go on is our definition of leadership, so we understand what that is. You're not a leader because you have a fancy title or because you have a lot of power necessarily. What we use as a definition is making a positive difference. That's what we're trying to instill in our students, is the notion of being basically a constructive person in your professional, and obviously if you're doing that in your professional life, you're also going to be that in your personal life. One thing that Bashar didn't mention about me is that I actually speak 5 languages, and they are English, French, and Polish, and these are the languages that reflect my heritage and my where I grew up, where I went to school. And then I also speak the language of math, which is the language of analytics. And for the better part of my career, I thought, that was my thing, that I'm a good analyst. I can use math. And I thought that's basically the key to my success, such as it is. But in the latter stages of my life, I've become far more enamored with the 5th language and far more reliant on that 5th language. And that 5th language is the language of feelings. So you might say, well, what's that about? And I think this gentleman, Edward O. Wilson, he put it really, really well. Edward O. Wilson is an evolutionary biologist, and he's actually the world's foremost ant expert. Those little insects. But he's bigger than that. His interest, in a general sense, he would describe it as the biological basis of social behavior. And I was just beginning to learn about Edward O. Wilson when I happened to be, watching television and flipping through the channels looking for something, and I came across him being interviewed. And there was a point in the interview where he was asked a question, and the way he answered the question is he held his hand out sort of like this, like he's cradling something, really quite weighty, I guess, of substance. And he said, the human soul resides in the emotional realm. And of course, what he's speaking about when this is not a religious person. This is, a humanist and so a scientist and someone who believes basically in biology and the physical world. But what he was talking about is our unconscious mind, and that's where the unconscious mind. That's where we find our intuition. That's where we find our creativity and imagination, our morality, if you will, and sort of the deepest evolutionary wisdom that we have. And so, that's why, this is so important, because feelings are actually the language of the unconscious mind. And if you think about what determines our future, how we shape our future, it's really through our imagination and then the choices that we make when we are confronted with whatever decisions we must make in life. So it's really to be able to connect that language that of our unconscious mind, of our human soul, if you will, to our conscious mind is really kind of important, it seems to me. Now, in my vocabulary of the language of feelings, one of the words I have is excitement, and what I would say about excitement is that when someone is excited about something that is new, then I think that they have a chance to grow, because that means they're wanting to try things, they're wanting to explore, they're open, and basically they're looking to evolve and to grow. But if someone doesn't want to hear about that new thing, if they shut their ears and don't tell me about that, then one thing is that they are stuck in the past. And there is no possibility of growth with people of that mindset. And I think that's really an important notion when you think about leadership, because I don't think that leaders are born. Leaders grow into it. And so that mindset in which you are open to exploration and open to growth, open to trying things, open to failure is essential. Now, Bashar mentioned that term learning ecosystem. I was quite proud of myself when I came up with this term, because I was actually quite desperate trying to explain something I was very excited about to somebody who did not want to hear about it. And so I needed to come up with language and ways of describing what I was excited about. And I came up with learning ecosystem, and I thought it was quite smart until later on I Googled learning ecosystem, and I discovered that, you know, every Tom, Dick, and Harry has some version of a learning ecosystem that they are trying to peddle you or explain to you or whatever. So I guess it's not a formal term, and it's not a proprietary term, but it's one that I continue to use. And the thing that I was excited about is, you know, to make it real simple, is really the community that had grown up around this program that I was co-directing and had been for many years. And it's a community and I guess an ecosystem that really grew up over time. And I think in large part, and not to sort of paint myself as too significant in all of this, but the reality I think is that, you know, when I came to Schulich, I'm not a trained academic, so I didn't do whatever it is that trained academics do, and I certainly didn't have to do a lot of you know, research and things of that type. I was a contract person. I was given a couple of courses to teach, and pretty much a clean slate of whatever it is that I was going to do. Nobody much. One of the beautiful things about working in a university, I don't know if you find this, David, maybe not in your life, but certainly in the academic side, you can do whatever the hell you want, you know, as long as you deliver your courses, and, you know, besides that, you do what you want. And I kind of did what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do, and what I liked doing was connecting people. And what I observed is that the students that I began to teach, you know, typically were second-year MBA students. And they had already taken a number of real estate courses, but what I found is that they didn't really know anything about the industry. They didn't know practical things because they were learning a theory and models and so on, but it wasn't connecting for them. And so that became sort of my mission, was to connect students into the industry and to bring the industry into the classroom. And in doing that, what I found myself was doing a whole bunch of different things that I think the typical academic wouldn't be doing, which was, you know, advising students and giving them career advice, and helping them to network and meet people, and helping them to find jobs, and then and working with alumni and trying to, you know, connect the alumni, kind of like David does, you know, and I guess Greg would do, trying to connect them back into whatever we were doing, and event planning and fundraising, you name it, I was doing it, just really as part of the process of just simply bringing the real world and the academic world for the students, you know, into the same orbit. And what I discovered one day, or became apparent to me one day, without it having really been planned, is that the students that I was teaching now were so much more engaged than the students I had been teaching when I first started, you know, at Schulich. And they were more confident, and they were better informed. You know, it was just a better group of students, and I don't think they had changed fundamentally. I think the program they were in had begun to change. And what I was finding is that our alumni were eager in so many cases to give back, because they were students that had grown out of a program in which they had been given a lot of support and help and connection, and they just continued doing that. Now that they were out of school, they were going to continue to do that, and they were quite eager to give back. And I found them beginning to grow, or in terms of leadership skills, organizational skills, you know, under our umbrella, as a sort of a byproduct of what they were doing, which is mentoring students and organizing a variety of events and things of that nature. And what I found is that industry, you know, when I first started to teach at Schulich, boy, you were hard pressed to find somebody who was going to come to school to recruit for the real estate industry. That's sort of a little bit of a function of the real estate industry in part, but it was also that we weren't really connected. And now I was finding, of course, you know, companies and the recruiters, you know, reaching out to us, trying to find ways to connect to our students, get to know them. We were finding people sponsoring and much more amenable to sponsoring events we were doing, people who wanted to establish scholarships with us, and so on. So I saw this whole little community growing, and it was a community that was engaged, and it was a community that was thriving. And when I had the opportunity to design the MRAI, I wanted to place it in the context of that community, because I understood, or at least I believed, that there would be so much more learning for the students by being connected into that community. And then again, it would continue to feed the community and continue to build what we were doing. So I want to tell you about one of the events, and my colleague Brian is quite involved in this event, as she is with many other things that we do every year, and that's called it's called the Perspectives Lecture. And we hold this every year. The last one we were able to do, of course, was 2019, and then COVID prevented us last year. And this year we're planning to do it again, but we're still not sure if it's going to be a hybrid event or an online event, or perhaps it might even be a live event again. And I'll just tell you a little bit about this event because I'm kind of pleased about it, really. And it's an event that we do, as I say, every year. We invite an industry icon to come in, and basically we encourage them to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And it's amazing how few opportunities, no matter who you are, you get to stand up in front of people and talk about whatever it is that you want. And what we really like it is when the icon is prepared to talk about their own personal history and share their learnings and provide their advice to our younger alumni and our students. And this is an event that doesn't cost the school a dime. It's an event that is funded through ticket sales and sponsorships, and it produces a profit, a meaningful profit every year, and that money goes into something we call the Student Experience Fund, and that Student Experience Fund then funds the students when they do things like travel on study tours. We take students to New York, and that's how I met David, bringing them to Montreal when we started doing that a couple of years ago. And maybe one day we'll bring the students to Amman, because we're hoping to go international in the future now that our program has gotten larger and better funded. So case competitions, students will occasionally have an opportunity. They get into finals or whatever and travel to participate in that. We do a specialized training through our student club that we subsidize the students again through the Student Experience Fund. So one of the things I'll mention right away is hopefully what you're seeing is kind of a circularity within this whole program, where it's not just about doing an event to show how successful we are or to get attention for ourselves. It's really an event that creates value for all of the participants that are there, and in turn nourishes and feeds this learning ecosystem. And some of those advantages, and you can see some of this. By the way, when I look at these pictures, I can see, there's a lot of guys there, not too many women. And I know that was one of the issues, David, you had mentioned people might want to talk about, but yeah, it's an industry that continues to be, we have more and more women coming into our program, but it is an industry that is still very male-centric. But putting that aside, what happens in these events, if you really break it down, is people meet. They come together and they meet and they see people that they know and they catch up, and they also meet new people. And they get information from each other about various things, including obviously lots of real estate stuff. And sometimes they get, in fact, often they get ideas. And so when they leave this event, as with any real estate event, except this is really quite a good one, when they leave this event, they're invigorated, right? They're really pumped up. They're feeling pretty good because they've met new people, they've reconnected, they've got new ideas, they've got some information, maybe that's of value. And our students are inspired, because now they're seeing this, the wonder of this industry, and they see how much opportunity and how many people are engaged in it and how vibrant it is. And they've heard from this great industry leader, and they've, picked up a few ideas, maybe they've been inspired. And for us, of course, it is good because we're building our network and we're raising our profile. So basically everybody is a winner, if you will, through this program. Now, the reason I bring up the Perspectives Lecture is because our speaker in 2019 was a gentleman named Mitch Goldhart. And Mitch is the founder and currently the executive chairman of a company called Smart Centers REIT, which is a major shopping center company. very, very successful. He's gone from zero to several $billion of net worth in about 25 years. And he's also, I would say, a very deeply intelligent human being. And he said something, and that's really where I want to get into the real estate stuff, that I thought, I'd never really heard anyone say it quite this way. And he was describing, he's actually a graduate of York University. He was a poli-sci student. And what he said is that when he was graduating, he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do. And his dad was saying, come into the business. It's a real estate, a family business. And Mitch wasn't sure. He said, I didn't know what business is. So I didn't want to know, I didn't know if that's what I wanted to do. And then one day, he said he realized that, and this is his words, they resonate with me. And so I remember them. He said, there are no businesses, there are no companies, there are only people. And I think this is like, for me, this is very, a very deep idea. It's a very deep awareness of something, because I recall that when I started in real estate, when we talked about the occupants of our building, it was because somebody complained about the air conditioning or something, and we had to fix a problem. But other than that, we were more concerned with, metrics. We were concerned with, the square footage of a tenant's, the area they might occupy. We were concerned with rents. We were concerned with vacancy rates and absorption rates. These are the metrics that we use to do the math to tell us if we should be investing in something or disposing of something or building something. And when we built buildings, we didn't talk about, what we talked about was, what it would cost. What we would talk about is the materials we might use and whether we could substitute something for something else and thereby save a few dollars. We talked about maybe about function. And if it was a big project, on a good day, we might talk about making an architectural statement, but we never, ever talked about elevating the human spirit. And so when I hear someone like Mitch say what he just said, that to me is a signal of something of a deeper understanding than maybe I had originally been exposed to. So now what I'm seeing, and this is actually what the way I see the business evolving today, because I'm actually seeing it, and I'll give you a few sort of little anecdotal things from my own, sort of local experience, if you will, but things that I think are very materially different in substance from what most of my time in the real estate industry has indicated to me. So here's a company called Allied Properties REIT. They're basically a office building company, also a public company, they're you might sort of call character real estate. They, a lot of their business is aimed at, or their occupancy, tends to be in the tech world and the creative world and so on. But this is the things. Michael Emery, who's a friend and who I've known for many years, and is the founder of Allied Properties REIT. This is how he talks about real estate today. He's talking about community, and he's talking about connection, and he's talking about creativity. He's not talking about the air conditioning, and he's not talking about it's brick or whatever it is that we're using in our building materials. There's reasons for those things, but they're not talking about that. They're talking really about how people feel and how people are more engaged in their workspaces. So that's one sort of indication, if you will, that I see. Here's another thing that has sort of come on the scene in relatively recent years. Something called the Well Building Institute, or the Green Building Council and their LEED certification. These are efforts, to develop standards, to develop certifications, to develop guidance and support in order to create a more sustainable, from an environmental standpoint, and healthier spaces. Again, this didn't exist when I started in real estate, and now it's becoming increasingly fundamental to new building, and even not just new building construction, but existing properties. And it's all you can put that frame all of that into the ESG movement that I won't say too much about, but I think it's something deeper than just meeting certain standards. Here's another one that is very striking for me. One of the companies I'm on the board of is a company called Dorsey, and we are in the process of developing, really at this point, we're planning development of 4,000 acres to the east of Toronto in a community that will be known as Varennes or Varane. If you're English speaking, people say Varane, I say Varennes. But it's about 4,000 acres. It will, when it's actually built and completed, it'll provide homes for 60,000 residents. It'll provide accommodation for 45,000 jobs. So it's a major project that we're doing. And I, as one of the directors of the company, but also with a bunch of other people, 5 or 6 of us, we were invited at the front end of this project in the first 2 or 3 years of planning to attend periodically these visioning meetings. And we were basically sitting there just brainstorming ideas, because the goal was, let's create the best community that we can possibly imagine. So we got to do some imagination before we can figure all of that out. And one of the gentlemen that was invited onto this group, I had not met before. His name is Ty Farrow, and he's an architect, and his firm is Farrow Partners. And in that first meeting, at some point, Ty said something about causing health. Now, I have never heard anyone use that term, causing health. I've heard, I understand causing illness, causing death, but I'd never heard anyone talk about causing health. And so I began to, converse with Ty about that and to follow what he's doing more and more, because I find it very, very interesting. Ty is someone who studies neuroscience. He will throw words around like biophilia. What he is interested in doing is not only just buildings that are sort of environmentally sustainable and responsible, not only that are conducive to physical health, but he's very concerned about what he calls mind health. And his belief is fundamentally that spaces are either a constructive, positive to us in that sense, or they're negative, that they are not neutral, and that we either respond in a way that really makes us healthier, or we respond in a way that makes us less healthy. Much like, eating junk food is considered not very healthy, but eating nutritious, enriched foods would be healthy. So he has that same sort of mentality about it. So again, this is something in my experience that is relatively new. I have not seen this kind of stuff until recent years. But here's the one that's really a kicker for me. Like this is the big one, and this comes from a gentleman named Mitchell Cohen. And Mitchell is he's the president of a company called Daniels Corporation, which is a major developer here in Toronto. It's a private company, and I met Mitchell because I'd in the leadership course, the first year that we were doing it, in the third term of the third course, it was really about just bringing in people that, in my mind, are true leaders, and bringing them in and having them speak to the students, and just share their philosophy and their way of doing things and why they did things that way and so on, and sort of kind of finish off that whole process that we were doing in the leadership course by actually having the living examples in our classroom. And I was familiar generally with what Daniels was doing, and it struck me as being very positive kind of stuff. So I reached out to Mitchell and got an introduction, and I asked him if he would come to class and speak to the students, and he said, "Well, I never do this," and literally he doesn't, and that's why I had never met him or seen him anywhere, because he just doesn't appear anywhere. He doesn't speak publicly, but he agreed, and he came, and what he said, the first words out of his mouth, to me were stunning. What he said is that Daniels is a vehicle for social change. I'd never heard a developer say that. I'm not sure that I'd ever heard any for-profit business person say that. Daniels is a vehicle for social change. And as I listened to him for the next hour or hour and a half as he spoke in the class, it was very, very clear that this isn't just words, that this is who the person is, that the reason he is in business is to have a positive impact on his environment, social and physical. But and this is not a guy who's doing it at the sacrifice of profits. This is the Daniels family are billionaires based on the work that they have done in this business over the last, I'm not sure now if it's 30 years or so, but it's in that range. So they've made a lot of money, but they've also done a lot of good things. And it's because he comes in with that mentality. So that really, to me, is what I would think of as a true leader when I think of Mitchell Cohen, because of that mentality that it brings to it. I can't say that I think most real estate owners, developers today are quite as far advanced in this process as Mitch is, but I do believe, and that's fundamentally what I think I'm saying, is that this is an evolutionary change where we're moving in that direction, and where what we're seeing the evidence of, I gave you the few examples before of people becoming more just that much more conscious of the community and the value of that, and just more socially responsible. Uh, I think that's all part of a trend that's taking place, and it begs the question why that would be. Why we're all of a sudden becoming more aware of each other in that way, and why we're becoming more inclusive, and why, if I may put it that way, we're becoming more sort of sensitive to the things that actually make us come alive and purposeful and give us meaning in our life. So this brings me back, interestingly, to to Edward O. Wilson, for whom I have a great deal of admiration. This is the last. Edward O. Wilson is an old man. I believe he's still alive, and if he is, he would be about 90 or 91 years old today. This is his last book that I'm aware of that he wrote. It's called The Meaning of Human Existence. And of course, given the things that I'm becoming interested in, when I knew of this book, I had to get it and I had to read it. That's my daughter's finger. She borrowed the book, and I said, I need a picture of my book. So she held it up and texted me the picture the other day. And it's The Meaning of Human Existence. And in this book, what he argues is that we as humans have evolved on two levels. And the first level is the level of the individual. And as individuals, what has been naturally selected over millions of years is the quality of selfishness. Because if we were not selfish, of course, then there's times where you have to be, or you wouldn't survive. So that has been naturally selected. But at the group level, what has been naturally selected is actually cooperation and altruism, and those qualities that enable people to work together in order to succeed. And that's essential at the group level, because lacking those qualities, a group would not be successful and would not survive, and its members would disappear. So that is what Edward O. Wilson would argue, is that this is the human nature. We have these qualities both of selfishness and of cooperation and altruism, that they are just simply part of who we are. They're neither good nor bad. They simply are who we are. So if we put aside the idea of the selfish for just a moment, because I think we all know how to be selfish, at least most of us do, and just talk about that other side for a moment. Once you recognize that that is an actual, fundamental to our survival, and that it is part of our nature, we have a better understanding, I think, then why we are such social beings, why connection is so important to our well-being, and our sense of belonging is important to our well-being, and why we are blessed with these qualities of empathy and the ability to love. These are essential to our survival. All these social needs, all these impulses, they're part of our nature, and they are contributory to our ability to cooperate and to really succeed and to grow. And without these qualities, we simply would not survive as a species. And if you go back to where I started, trying to talk about the Brookfield Center, learning ecosystem and the way it thrives, I think that is really why it is what it is. It's because it is based on connection, and it is based on creating a sense of belonging to people, giving them something to belong to that's bigger than who they are as individuals, and because it's cooperative and it's giving, and all of that is conducive to growing and evolving and becoming better. And if you look at the real estate side that I've been talking about, and you want to understand the change that's happening in real estate, I think it's really about recognizing that deep human need that we all have to connect and to actually as I said about leaders in general, to make a positive difference. I think that is actually in our nature to do that. As human beings, I think we have a deep-seated need to give to others, because that evolutionary wisdom that resides in our human soul it tells us that in the long run, when we help others, we are actually helping ourselves. And so that is really, I think it's at the heart of the changes that I see actually happening in real estate. It's a recalibration, if you will, of that balance between self-interest and selfishness and other consciousness. And I think those that see the need to do this and look for ways like Mitchell Cohen to create constructive change as part and parcel of what they do in their professional and profitable lives, they're the people that I call true leaders. And that's the kind of people that I hope in our program, through the things that we do, we're going to tend to cultivate that sort of mentality. And I'll bring it right back down, just in conclusion to that MRAI, I mentioned there were two elements, in the vision, one being the leadership and the other being the learning ecosystem, but really they're really only one thing, because it seems to me that leadership and that self-transcendence, that ability to see beyond yourself, really go hand in hand, and they're really essentially one thing. So that will conclude everything I have to say. And if we want to talk about this or anything else, I'm more than happy to chat.
Well, we appreciate your contributions, Professor Andre. It was very great to hear these different anecdotes and examples and how real estate ties into all of this. I'm going to start off with a quick food for thought. Well, you mentioned one of your 5 languages is mathematics and analytics. And then we talked about the social aspect of real estate. How would you quantify the social aspect to use in, say, for example, an algorithm or a model mathematically to be able to be a better decision maker in possibly designing a development or even studying a potential investment in a specific, could be residential, commercial, or industrial? How would you quantify the social aspect to be able to become a better decision maker through this mathematical algorithm?
Well, I guess my answer is I wouldn't. I think math has its limitations. Theoretically, I suppose you could say, well, a better building, a building that is more, a more popular building, a building in which people are happier, more content. Those are buildings in which tenants are more likely to take space. They're buildings in which tenants are more likely to renew their leases. There are buildings where perhaps higher rents will be achieved. But I don't know that you can think of it, well, this is a socially somehow more responsible building, so I'm going to run this numbers to tell me that it's worth more or whatever. I think to me, math, what I used to, when I was teaching real estate finance and investment, I was quite a stickler, I guess, for accuracy and just doing it right. But what I also explain to students is it's like studying music. You do your scales because you've got to learn technique. Once you've mastered the technique, that's when you can become a virtuoso. And I think this thing that you're asking me about is part of the virtuosity of real estate. It's part of the subjective judgments that we make, and not something that we try to figure out mathematically if it's worth doing.
Well,
sorry,
okay.
Sorry, Bashar.
Yeah, no.
I can't tell you how to do it mathematically. I just don't know.
It's interesting because I did a few courses on artificial intelligence in real estate, and this used to be one of the sticking points. How would you quantify the social aspect? So I just wanted to see if it runs along the board of most investment or financial analysts that are going through, are going through the same issue of being able to quantify this. So yeah, it's understandable. And one more question before I open up the floor to everybody. Well, this is the cliche sort of question in real estate. You have a portfolio, a financial portfolio in property. What would be the ideal breakdown, percentage-wise, residential, commercial, industrial? If you have a portfolio, is there an ideal breakdown?
Yeah, again, yeah. I mean, I think there was a lot of work that was done over the years, under modern portfolio theory, sort of trying to apply it to real estate and come up with all of these sort of models and so on. But one of the things that, and this is the hard thing that's hard to, again, quantify, is this is a very management intensive, and I, even using the word management is maybe doesn't do it justice. It's a very creative business, and it's a business of economies of scale, having and it's a very local business in terms of its actual performance. Capital flows freely across borders, but the real estate is not on wheels. It stays where it is, and it serves a local sort of population. So one of the things is that you've got to be good. One of the things, when you look at how where the return from real estate comes, a very small fraction of it comes from the capital appreciation. Sometimes people think that that's what real estate is about, but in the short term, you can get swings in value that are fairly significant, because markets go in cycles. But over the long run, and real estate is a long run, long-term asset class. It's a very durable asset class. Over the long term, what you find is that 80 or 90% of the return comes from the income that's generated from the building, and only a small proportion, not even enough to keep up with inflation, comes from capital appreciation. So you've got to be able to keep your buildings well leased. You've got to be able to keep your buildings achieve high rents. You've got to be able to allocate the capital to sustain that in intelligent ways, where you're not wasting it, but you're using it, appropriately to sustain your rents and perhaps to get better rents. And that there's a lot of subjectivity and a lot of sort of local market expertise and knowledge that is required to do that. So to sort of say, I'm going to have some of this real estate over here and some of this real estate over there, because that the model says so, but I'm not in a position to essentially manage it competitively with the better players in each of those markets, because I haven't got the scale of portfolio, and I haven't got the local, the ability to hire the people that have that intelligence and that knowledge. Kind of defeats the purpose. One of the interesting things, a study has been done looking at pension fund performance in the U.S. versus in Canada, and they don't do so good in the U.S. And the basic reason they don't is because they spend a lot of money hiring third-party managers to manage their real estate, and so the returns are being eaten up by these fees. Whereas in Canada, the model is more managing it directly on their own, and we have these large companies like Oxford Properties and Cadillac Fairview and others that are owned by pension funds, but they actually operate as sort of independent, if you will, large investment, development, and management platforms. And they do better because their cost of operating is just much smaller, but they can only do that because of their scale. So I don't know if I've answered that question, but again, I think there are models that are run, and those models, the other thing is that the models always run on historic data. And the history is not necessarily a predictor of the future. So we have certain model portfolios that come out, but then whether they will actually perform is a separate issue, because the market may not operate as it did in the past.
Great. Well, thank you for this insight and input. I'd like to open up the floor for any questions. Please just chip in, anybody who has a real estate related question or learning ecosystem. We're glad to have them answered by Professor Andre.
I have a question. Thank you, Professor Andre, for this very informative lecture briefing. I'd like to ask you, given the Corona era that we're experiencing right now, how it's affecting a lot of products, a lot of markets, what do you think in terms of real estate? Are we going to be moving away from building management systems and automation more into like comfort, as you shed some light, the green buildings or something of that sort? I don't know, how's that affecting? Do you think it's going to make a change?
Yeah, well, I think COVID is accelerating changes that are already taking place for the most part. I think that you know, that social element that I was trying to talk about is so critical and important. I think people are going to, generally speaking, you know, want to continue to congregate in buildings and whether workplaces, shopping centers, and so on. I think, you know, the question of you know, technology is a big deal. I think technology is going to impact, continue. Well, it's already there, but I think it's going to be used more and more to as support to that social experience, to be able to access amenities and so on. I think the building automation and you know, the whole sort of mechanical issues and how technology can affect that. I think, you know, obviously air quality has become a much even more prominent issue. We're going that direction, but now we're more concerned with the spread of viruses and systems that tend to either filter them out or disperse them more effectively. That's all, you know, part of the story. So, you know, I think all the basic trends that we've seen are going to continue, and the real estate in terms of its built form is going to continue to evolve, to adapt as it's always done. You know, things change. So, you know, I think the big questions have been around office space, and you know, we'll probably see, I would expect to see more flexibility in that, both in terms of where people work. I think it's you know, once you've had the opportunity to work from home, you appreciate the flexibility, because there are times when being in the office is not actually conducive to anything, and it's a pain in the butt to get there. But for the most part, people are missing being in the office. Shopping center is another one where we've seen, you know, the advent of technology and online sales, and you know, people having stuff delivered, and so many more of us are doing so much more of that because you can't go into the stores anymore. So now you're ordering your stuff online. So I don't think that's going to disappear. It's probably going to accelerate that. And yet that experience of going where other people are and engaging in a sort of communal activity and seeing, you know, people watching and everything else, that's not going away. So I think there's some continuing opportunity for retail and for service retail, but we'll probably see that you know, evolving, and we'll probably see a lot more redevelopment or addition to sort of major shopping centers that will provide complementary uses, whether it's you know, residential and so on. Yeah, I mean, you know, I just think it's going to continue to be changing and evolving. But that's why I go back to this. Some of the things that I talked about, I think that yeah, sorry, the other issue that I think people have been talking about is downtown versus suburban, or, you know, and whether because of public transit and people not wanting to get on, you know, ride subways because of the proximity and everything else. And I think that is also, there's going to be some impact where there's going to be some disbursement out of downtown, and yet downtowns are where the action is. And a lot of that, I think, is based more on demographics, where people are going to go, than it is on whether, you know, we're too concerned about being too close to other people. So certainly in the Toronto market, you know, just the demographics would suggest that people are a bulk of, you know, the big sort of a bump of people that are more downtown orientated in terms of the millennials. They're now getting to child rearing stage and more inclined to find homes in the suburbs where they can have more space in a yard and so on. So we're going to see those kind of things, and they're not all COVID related, but some of them certainly are being accelerated by that experience. Yeah.
Professor Andre, thank you for again for being the guest of MAA Jordan today, and for the thought-provoking session. My question to you is the following. Where do you think, or how far do you think Canada has gone in achieving real estate that addresses bodily and mind health of individuals? How far are we? And the second part of my question is, as far as Canada is concerned, do you think it's a time to buy real estate at this point in Canada, especially say for investors like us who are outside of Canada, like in Jordan? And what do you think of real estate stocks? Is it a buying market or a seller's market? Thank you.
Geez, I hate doing all this stuff, right? Because I don't actually know what I'm talking about. One of the major things that I've learned in life is that I don't know anything. But so let me try to remember your question. The first question was, how far have we gone? That's not really an area of great expertise on my part, but my sense is we're starting. We're not ending. We're starting. I think there's just so much of an awakening that COVID has, created. I'll give you one example. I mean, one of the companies I'm on the board of today is called Chartwell Retirement Residences, and about 10% of our portfolio is long-term care. And this has been a devastating experience, as you're probably aware, in Ontario, which is where our homes are, and in Canada generally. And that, our aging population, that is where the it's changed now in the second and third wave, but in the first wave, it was all in the long-term care. This is where people were getting sick, and this is where people were dying. And the fundamental reason for that, there were two reasons where this took place. One was the level of infection in a particular community, and the second was the actual homes itself. And it was the older homes, what in Ontario we call the Class C homes, that simply had, there's no room for people to be separated. They're in some cases 4 to a room or 2 to a room, narrower hallways, smaller community spaces, and so on. And so it spread, and there was, really before anybody could really react to it. So this has spawned now where there's a whole, and we're not all the way through the process of it yet, but it's certainly already spawned an acceleration of a new capital from the government to go into creating and replacing these Class C homes with modern state-of-the-art, which would have far more resilience and ability to protect against something like a coronavirus. So, but I think we have a long way to go in that. I think it takes a long time to replace the existing stock of buildings, and most of them have been built with a far less awareness and far less consideration for wellness and health generally. So you had two other questions. Second question was, do I think it's a good time? I think it depends where you are. I mean, the real estate prices, I was just on a call yesterday. We had a strategy review of one of the companies I'm on the board of in light of coronavirus. And so we had sort of an exceptional board meeting, and this is a company with Swiss shareholders. And sorry, I've lost my train of thought. The question is, timing. And I think one of our managers was just speaking, and he said anecdotally, he's like Brian, he's got a cottage on a lake, and he said the cottage across the lake was sold, had been bought last year and was sold this year, a year later, for twice the price. Now that's not the norm, but we're certainly seeing huge increases depending on where you are, especially in suburban locations. And in more sort of cottage country, very, very, very significant price increases of what was already expensive real estate. Toronto today is one of the least affordable cities on an average basis in terms of when you look at a price versus people's income. That makes one nervous as to whether the timing is good. But I think that there are offsetting that. Toronto is a city that attracts over 100,000 new immigrants every year, and that's going to continue probably for a very long period of time. And that puts huge pressure in terms of housing. So How do you balance those things? I'm not sure. I've always been of the view personally, and I mean, maybe call me Mr. Conservative. I've always said you don't buy a home for investment. You buy a home for because you need a home, and then you make that decision based on what you need and what you can afford, rather than try to look at it as a purely of an investment decision. Now, with all of that said, I got to tell you, like in the condo market, for example, in Toronto, the investors are still there. Every new project is very quickly selling out, and the investors have also moved into the suburbs, recognizing that new home sales are where the action is even more so now than in the condo sales, and so investors are going out there and looking to buy these homes, and I guess the plan would be to rent them out. That's a relatively new phenomenon for Toronto, but I would not be telling so I would not be saying, hey, this is a great time, jump in. On the other hand, do I think long term, the fundamentals of Canadian real estate are good? I do. The third question was the public markets. A good time to get in would have been several months ago, because real estate stocks were generally speaking quite beaten up. Some are still lagging a bit, but they recently have been moving all up quite strongly, because there's a sense that we're going to get through this now, and the impacts are. I think you can't generalize totally. If you're looking at shopping center companies, well, they're still beat up more so because there's still a sense that they are, going to suffer relative to what they were because of online shopping and the general trend that is impacting retail. And office has suffered a bit, but I think that's coming back. And on the other hand, apartment stocks are, really expensive. Stocks of companies that are in the multifamily business, because that's seen as a very, very safe and in demand sector. So if you're going to get into the stocks, you're going to have to pick and choose and really decide which sectors you like. And then I've always been a very big proponent of management. I think like my bet is not really on real estate. My bet is on the quality of the people and their knowledge and their business acumen, rather than which particular sector they may be in. Chartwell is a good company. In fact, it's a great company, but Bashar, looks like we're kind of done.
Seems so. Well, thank you. Appreciate your input and feedback, Professor Andre. And one last shot of questions, if any. Well, we can call it a wrap. And well, yep.
Well, listen,
going twice.
I want to thank you, Bashar, and because I have done alumni events at Schulich. I've probably done like 12,000 million. And I've never done one for McGill, so this was a real pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity. And thank you to David for connecting us.
To David, yeah.
David don't worry, don't worry, Andre. Now that we have you doing them, it'll be like a repetitive. It'll be just like our weekend meetings.
No. Now that you've met Bryna, you can talk to her. So that's
okay.
I was just going to say that I think we need to get you more involved at the Faculty of Management, back where you got your MBA, Professor.
Well, you know what? This thing about professor, like people insist on calling you that, and I guess I let them because students certainly sometimes are much more comfortable to do that. But I'm not a professor; I'm just a guy. So please call me Andre next time we meet. Anyway, Greg.
Definitely so.
Okay, well, anyway, I don't want to cut it off. It's up to you guys, but as far as I can see, we're done, and I really appreciate it again. And I guess we'll be speaking whenever. Bashar,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
We'll be connecting. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was a pleasure, and hopefully this is one of many to come in terms of specialized roundtables. Thank you again, and we hope to see you again in further discussions down the road.
Thank you, Bashar. Bye-bye.
Have a great afternoon/evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Andre. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.